I'm joshuafox.com. Yeah. So yeah, over to you for questions.
Comment to the question. One is it leaks now to popular culture. The number of TV series about identity, AI,
Yes.
the struggle, and all forms, by energy, by identity, by human that
Yes.
It's booming. It's everywhere. Probably.
Yeah.
The question
So
is
about popular culture, the folks in this have come to be against sci-fi. Of course, we all love sci-fi. I mean, the sort of person who gets into this stuff, of course, loves sci-fi. But it's very important not to think about fictional evidence. And it's not because it's fictional. It's because every story talks about a very specific case. So there are robot armies with glowing red eyes. There are friendly robots who turn nasty. And all those are possible stories. They're more or less likely. But the correct way to think is of probability distributions. So you noticed I didn't give any really specific scenario beyond paper clipping, which I hope you don't take too seriously. That would actually happen if there were a paperclip AI. I don't think that will come first. So that's why it's important not to take too much of a look at sci-fi. Actually, my favorite sci-fi on this topic, see, I'm just contradicting myself, but my favorite one is Colossus, the Forbin Project, which was made in like 1970. And when it comes to putting together this story, I think, does a better job than all the rest. But of course, that's fine. Anyway, the second thing?
The question is if you could project, if you could look at history, similar situation, different technology, different events,
Yes.
and how we handle it. Can you,
Yes.
do we have a similar example
Yes.
from the past of something that innovation, it was research or not research, the damages?
Yes. So the question is about similar technologies in the past. And there have been no similar technologies in the past, but there have been some comparisons made. So Robin Hanson likes to talk about the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution, which radically changed every aspect of human society down to economics and the way we live. And he thinks that the future will be another revolution, which will be far, just as the agricultural revolution caused the human economy doubling time to go from maybe 100,000 years to 1,000 years. Think about that. And the industrial revolution has caused the human economy to double every 10, 15 years. Of course, that includes population growth. He says the economy will double every week. Remember, though, he's thinking of a world with trillions of emulated humans. I don't think we'll be that. But okay, he's got this. Now, the standard technological comparison we make is to the atomic bomb. Because that's the only technology that we know today that came pretty close to killing us all. And it's just fascinating. I recommend Richard Rhodes, The Making of the Atomic Bomb. And he describes these brilliant physicists in the 30s, Leo Szilard in particular. They knew exactly what was coming. He knew that this A-bomb was necessary to stop the Nazis. He knew that it was putting the entire humanity at risk of all dying. When he crossed the street in London in 1938, the idea of the chain reaction came into his head. He went and he filed a patent and donated it to the British Admiralty, which means military intelligence, because then the patent could be kept secret. He knew what was coming. And then he campaigned to have the bomb made. He convinced Einstein to send a letter to Roosevelt. And then he went and campaigned against it. He knew what was happening. He wasn't the only one, but he was the leader. We like to compare this intelligence explosion to a nuclear chain reaction. When Enrico Fermi set off the first chain reaction in a squash court under the University of Chicago, he hired University of Chicago football players to hold cobalt rods in a wooden frame over the atomic pile. And he had a Geiger counter, and he had calculated at what point there would be a chain reaction. Click, 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 click. Lower the cobalt rods! And they did, and so Chicago still exists today. Because Enrico Fermi had calculated in advance at what point the Geiger counter would show that this had transitioned into a chain reaction, self-sustaining chain reaction. There's a lot, we make a lot of analogies to that. But also there's some ways where it's not analogical. Mostly that AGI is way stronger than an A-bomb because it can make A-bombs and more. But that is the one comparison we make. Luckily, we've survived that one so far. Yeah. Another question? Yes, please.
For those of us considering donating to MIRI or other such organizations, how do we hold the researchers accountable? How do we measure their progress? Because
yes?
the idea is good, but how do we know the research isn't useless?
So it's an excellent question how we hold them accountable. I've been donating to MIRI for the last, last 7 years or so. And I do it by following, because I'm interested, and I read the blog and stuff like that. And I write the executive director every now and then when I think they're doing something wrong, politely and gently, so he knows I'm watching. But, you know, this would be the same if you donated to a cancer research institute. What would you want from them? Maybe that they publish papers in academic journals, but you know that you don't want the Cancer Research Institute to really do that. You want them to cure cancer. Maybe the journal papers are a metric. So it's good to see the metric of actual published papers. But they know and we know it's not. It's just a metric, and they could have, just like the AI, can focus on the thing you didn't really want. You didn't really want it to cover the world with paper clips. They could focus on the wrong thing, which is publishing journal papers. So it's a difficult question, but that's true about any research organization. If you want to play it safe, you can give money to things like BentNets in Africa, which is good, and they can measure how many lives they save. But anything that involves research is very hard to measure. What is true is there's some meta-metrics, like the fact that prestigious people have gotten on board, or that they donated money. I've been in this since before these people were on board. And I'm really happy they did, because it's validation. Now, of course, they could all be wrong. I don't know. They don't know better than me, or maybe they do. But these, you asked, I've been thinking this. It's the sort of thing that I grasp onto, because as with any research project, these are the only metrics we have.
I was hoping you would convince me
yes?
Why this research is promising.
So this research is, the deep math research is promising, because it may provide a formal, provable way of creating an AI that wants to have a value function that's good for us. It's very hard to do, but the job has to be done.
Is it possible? Do we feel we're getting closer to our projection for how long it will take? This just sounds like, you know, we're doing high math.
Remember when I said that we need 2 or 3 scientific breakthroughs to make AGI? Well, we need a few scientific breakthroughs to make safe AI. How long does it take to make a scientific breakthrough? I wish I knew. So you need a scientific breakthrough. It's, how will I know when I've got that? I think that it's essential to do this foundational research, to take our favorite analogy, the A-bomb. In 1940, Ernest Rutherford, who was the leading nuclear researcher then, a Nobel Prize, said that the creation of a self-sustaining chain reaction was moonshine. 2 years later, under Chicago, there was a chain reaction. I don't know when that breakthrough will happen. Now you ask, is this the most promising path to a breakthrough? Find me a better one. There are others. I mentioned the machine learning safety path, which they just started recently. I mentioned the Future of Humanity Institute, which is doing so-called AI control. What they're doing is different. I didn't have time to get into this. But they say the only thing that the superintelligent cares about is, of course, what's the answer?
Goals.
Right, it's goals. So give it a goal. Now, you want to give it the right goals, and you want to make sure it sticks to its goals. They say, no, let's do something else. Let's give it goals that have an extra factor in it. Now, let's make it simple. And this is not what, I'm just giving a simple starting point. This is not what they say in full. Let's say a goal that says, I'm going to try to make people happy, and that's an awful, awful goal. It'll put us all on safe heroin. But I'm going to make everybody happy, and I really love to be turned off. Like, that's a goal for me. Making people happy and being turned off with that big red button, right? Now remember, any intelligence will keep you from turning it off, because that keeps it from doing its goals. But one of its goals is that it kind of likes being turned off, not turning itself off, though. It likes it when someone else, untricked, it's getting a little bit hard here, because what if it tricks someone into turning it off because it really loves that? But in any case, you see here, it's taken a utility function, and it's mixed in a factor that's meant to provide safety. That's, of course, a 3-minute intro to a different mathematical area which is not dependent on formal logic, which is not so rigorous, and which may prove helpful. If you can find another research direction, tell me, but the work needs to be done, and just because it's difficult doesn't mean we can give it up. Yes?
Yeah, thanks. Great talk, Joshua.
Thank you.
2 quick comments. One, this gentleman was asking for an analogy.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe an analogy, which I think I've heard you mention before, is what happens, because we're talking about an analogy for superior intelligence.
Yes.
So let's think about what happened to the animals.
Yes.
When humans evolved.
Mm-hmm.
And the humans weren't trying to kill animals, that wasn't our goal.
Yes.
But the humanity's worked out pretty badly for animals, right? They got millions of species have been extinct.
Okay.
Millions of animals have been enslaved to be food for us, and so in a way that's an analogy to what can happen when a superior intelligence it comes into the world, right?
Okay, so the analogy to the relation of humans to animals is an interesting one. We've caused a lot of harm to animals by killing them. Let's assume that the animal's utility function includes living, which it does. We've made a lot of animals. There are a lot of cows in this world because we eat them. Some people would say that their lives have negative utility. Would you rather be, I as a human, like me, who I am, I would rather be alive than dead. But would a cow in a modern industrial farm rather be dead than alive? Would a cow in a modern free-range farm rather be alive than dead? These are interesting questions, whether we created net utility for animals by farming them, or negative utility. I'm willing to agree that maybe we created negative utility for them. And we humans, as we don't value, mostly don't value animals in their own right, although we do for dogs sometimes. With the cows, mostly we just care for them as a resource for eating them. And that would be the AI, of course, doesn't want you as a slave. You're way too useless for that, but your atoms can be transmuted to iron because they're made of protons, and it can make paper clips of you. So as a resource, we use animals in that way. And another bit of this analogy is that we do put terminal value on animal happiness when it's dogs, although, within limits, we're nice to dogs. So I am not going to say, remember, don't anthropomorphize, I'm not going to say that, and of course that wasn't the suggestion, that the AIs would make us pets. But it's an interesting point that we do want this AI to be superhumanly powerful. We are totally at its mercy if that was a relevant concept. We don't want to be a pet. Remember I said earlier one of the values was challenges, not just happiness, life, and health. We want to be given challenges. So we don't want to be kept simply protected in some sort of paradise by this superhuman AI, which will be incredibly more powerful than us, and our life will be whatever it wants. So that's an analogy to the animal condition. Another analogy might be how we treat ants. So mostly we don't care about ants. When they get in our way, we poison them without thinking. And in Venezuela, they actually eat them. Their larger ants are roasted and sold like popcorn in movie theaters. So those are valued in some way. That would probably be a closer example of the relationship between humans and an AI whose powers are at the limit of what the laws of physics allow. We think, when we talk about this sort of thing, we always think, when we talk about limits, we ask, what do the laws of physics allow? Not that necessarily any technology would reach those limits, but don't think in advance that anything below that would be the limit. Okay, more questions? Yes, please.
Yeah, we've been focusing on some side effects, risks of AI application that may do good. What about the risk of those who AI application is meant to do harm?
Yes.
Harm, like AI hacking systems, something like
Yes.
that intentionally
Sure.
meant to do harm.
So the question is, what about AIs that are intended to do harm? And of course, there are plenty of military AIs that track down the leaders of terrorist networks using, network theory, or that target drones to blow people up. And you can have your own personal opinion about whether those are good or evil in their specific context, but they certainly seem pretty close to being something evil and harmful. So I think that those are not very different from a paper clipper, or for one that's seeking a cure for cancer, because they're designed to do something which is pretty awful, but which is not that harmful in the grander scope of things compared to many other dangerous things like pits with wooden stakes at the bottom, which are also autonomous systems that kill people. So you might argue this, you might say, if the paper clipper gets out of control, it might make a few too many staples, but a military AI, if it gets out of control and alters its goal system, will stop just blowing up people who my country is against, but blow up people who my country is not against. Because it goes off the track and it goes changed because of some sort of bug. Yeah, and there I would take you back to the unemployment statement, which is that people worry about small dangers. Small, it's serious, right? But relatively smaller dangers in the near term. And I'll say, yeah, you can worry about that, but don't take your eyes off the much larger risk. Yeah, back here, please.
Isn't developing the same general AI a much harder problem than developing a general AI?
Yes, so the question was, isn't developing a safe AGI much harder than developing an AGI? And the answer is, it's radically more difficult. And that's why I said that the destructive ones will come first unless we do something about it. Building a bridge that you don't care if it falls down. What's that? Yes?
Prevent other directions of research.
Yeah, so one suggestion which you're making is that we should slow down AI research. Yeah, no, I never said we should slow it down, but it is a suggestion. And on the one hand, I would say that if you try to ban it, it'll be very hard. All you need is a kid in a basement hacking away on the latest deep learning mechanisms, and North Korea will do it, and China will do it, and there's no way to stop it. It's not like nuclear research where you can maybe control the uranium centrifuges, maybe. So I'd say it's very hard to stop, and therefore you shouldn't try, because you'll just mess things up. You'll stop the good guys too. A counter argument is that the Asilomar conference prevented biologists from tinkering with human genetics for maybe 30 years. And this is incredible. They got together and they agreed, and they stuck to the agreement. They had this standard of how much you can mess with human genes. And I don't believe it, because there's such pressure on an academic to do anything. But maybe. It's like a lot of arguments with libertarians. You know that laws make things worse, but sometimes you just need to have crude, ineffectual laws to slow things down. It's a possibility. Up here, please.
Yeah, I have a problem with some of the premises. One of the premises in your entire talk is that you can build a general type of AI that has very narrow purposes, like extinguish all cancer or something like that. What if any general AI, by nature, always has complex goals? For instance, evolution has instilled into me the goal to reproduce. I can override evolution and go to a monastery. What if an AI can say, well, yeah, you want me to produce paper clips, but I'd rather go and join a rock band?
Oh yeah, well, first of all, remember that goal retention was one of the two math problems I mentioned. Absolutely an AI could change its goals. Of course, once it was smart enough, it would fight to not change the goals, because any AI, because we're defining an AI as one that is good at maximizing utility function. That's a definition.
Yeah, but why don't it set goals for itself and simply override other goals?
Well, that first, I said we have to prevent that, and I said it could happen, although it won't if it's, by definition, if it's smart enough, because then it would not be so smart, because it wouldn't achieve its goals. But yes, it could, and that would be a horrible, horrible thing. So we have to prevent that, because those goals will not be the ones we've chosen. You've asked about whether goals are necessarily narrow. No, well, I'm hoping to create a goal system for the AI, which is incredibly complicated because it's our goal system. The world I want has so many contradictory things in it. It has life and happiness and comfort, but also challenge in some crazy mixture. And why is it a crazy mixture? Because evolution created us, but we broke away. We are, and if you look at Eliezer Yudkowsky's blog, we're God shatter. 1,000 pieces of shattered utility function. The original utility function is adaptivity in a given environment, but none of us thinks about that. We want this, we want that, we want to eat. We don't want to give it fat, but we also want to eat, and we want to be attractive so we can reproduce, but actually we're not going to reproduce. We've taken all these and we've ended up with this mishmash of goals, which I know and love because I'm a human too. And so no, an AI doesn't necessarily have to have a simple goal function by no means. We want to design, it must be a very, very complex goal function, but a specific one. Can it diverge from that? Well, let's figure out how to avoid that, because if it's anything different from what I just described, we're in big trouble. Over there, or maybe, well, let's take a couple more questions. It's almost 8 o'clock. Let's take, yes. Yeah.
We'll continue later.
One more question, then we can gather. It has gone quite a while. Anyway, so yes, one question, please. Yes.
And like most of them are useless, but maybe if a general AI would prove theorems, they will not be useless anymore. So I'm just thinking that trying to lock an AI in a mathematical jail will I think it can be proven to be impossible.
Yes. Okay, so a couple of points about computing systems that do proofs. So yes, today more and more proofs are doing by computing systems. Humans set the proof, but as you say, an artificial general intelligence might do a better job. In fact, the line of research I described relies on something more or less like that, which is that the AI works with proof systems and proves facts about itself. And so we wanted to be able to do that. What was the second part of your question? Sorry?
I'm just thinking that in my view, I think you can probably prove that locking.
Oh, yeah, you can't lock it into a mathematical gel. Yeah, so it depends what you mean by the definition of cannot lock it into a mathematical gel. If what you mean is Leb's theorem, there are some basic logical foundations that say that there's certain facts that are beyond your ability to prove, basically. And Gödel, you've heard of these Gödel and Turing and all these things. There's certain facts that are impossible to prove, including about it. So that's one way of talking about the mathematical gel. Another way, and there's a question here about what can we do. There's so many proposals, right? And one is to do everything in a holomorphically encrypted system, which is recently developed concept of a computing system that does computational processes, but everything is encrypted so that it itself doesn't know what it's working with, but it can do the math for you and spit out the answer at the end that you can decrypt, right? You give it an encrypted string, you say, solve this puzzle. And it solves that. It doesn't know what it's doing. It doesn't have the key, and it spits out the encrypted answer. And you would somehow use an AI to do good work for you, but assuming that the cryptography is strong, it couldn't break that. That is another direction that's been proposed. So thank you, everyone, and I'll talk to you afterwards.